Hi there, glad you could join me. We're continuing our deep dive of Procreate 5, and this week we're checking out Animation Assist. So animation was introduced into Procreate quite recently, only a couple of versions ago, and it was pretty rudimentary to start with, very simple. It was cool to have the animation tool, but it was certainly very limited in what it could do. So it's great to see extra development in this feature. So today we're going to create our own animation. I find the best way to learn a new skill is to actually get hands-on and practice. So we've got this little scene of a sea and some letters floating around. It'll be good fun. So let's get started. So I'm in Procreate now and I have my illustration and my scene ready to go. If you want to follow along with this tutorial, you can download this static image just under the video description here and you can follow along with the steps. Also, just to note, the illustration of these letters is actually created from a font, so I've left that in the description as well in case you wanted to check it out. It also includes these little faces and the arms and the hat. Everything is part of the font, so it's really good fun to play with. A link in the description if you want to see that. So first of all, I'll show you how the document's laid out. Now, I've left this pretty messy on purpose just to show you how we need to change things around in order for it to animate properly. So something important to understand with animation projects is how Procreate sees layers. Basically, it sees every layer as a frame. So currently it would play this animation layer by layer, so it would have a blank blue, then the clouds, then the SEA, all separately. What we want to do is actually combine that scene so that it's all on the first frame, and then we're going to animate these little letters bobbing around in the ocean. So the first thing I know I can do is to merge the background and the clouds. I'm going to merge that together and I'll just call that sky. And then another thing I notice as well is this S has many different parts that make up the eyes and the mouth, etc. Keeping these as they are, as all separate layers, we'll be duplicating those to fill on every frame, so we'll quickly be reaching our layer limit. Procreate has a layer limit according to the size of your canvas and resolution, and as this is quite a large image, that will be pretty quickly reached. So I'm not going to change the S in any way, it'll just be moving position. So I know I can actually just flatten that. I mean, you could make a really cool animation with little blinking eyes and the mouth, etc., but that's for another time. For the purposes of this project, we're just going to be bobbing them up and down. And then finally, we've got our ocean. So that's made up of a few components, and I'm going to keep those separate just because I might choose to move those around independently. So I'll just group that. And I'll name it Ocean. So at this stage, it might be a good idea just to open Animation Assist so that you can see how it's going to treat the document. So if we just open Animation Assist via the canvas under Actions, now you'll see down here we have these frames according to the layers. So what's happening as well, you might notice that it is faded in the background. That's just because we have onion skinning turned on. I'm going to talk more about that later, but for the moment I'm going to just knock it back so we can see clearly what's on each frame. So that's still not quite what we want. And rather than deleting, you might think, oh, well, we just need to delete these frames. I'll show you what happens if we do. If I press on the frame, I can get some actions around it, and I'll just press delete. Now I'll open my layers and you'll see that's actually deleted the layer itself. That's not quite what we want. So I'm going to undo that, make sure it's there. Yep. Okay, so we're going to go back, just ignore, sorry, that seems to be an artifact that's just come in the sky, but everything's covering it, so it doesn't matter. So it's clear here what we have is the layers and the frames working together, even to the point where if I added a layer at the end and I just fill that with a color, you can even move layers around from the frame. So if I choose to move that frame forward, it's actually changed the layer position in the layers as well. If I delete it here, it deletes it from the frame. So what we actually want is everything on the first frame and then to animate the elements in it. So how do we do that? So what we do is we go back to this first frame here, and now Procreate's introduced the ability to set a background. And this is fantastic because that means this sky layer doesn't have to repeat with every layer group or every frame. We can actually just set it as the background and it'll be consistent throughout the animation. So you see you get this extra extension on the frame just to the right, which indicates that it's going across every frame. So that's set as the background now. And now another great feature is we can actually use a group, and Procreate will consider that as a layer. So you can use groups now, which means we can use a non-destructive way of working. You can actually keep these layers independent from each other. You don't have to merge them and flatten to one flat image. Now I'm going to add a frame to the animation, and I could just press add frame here, and that adds a blank frame and a new layer. What I actually want is for the scene to continue, so I want the other elements. So what I'm going to do is just press duplicate on this frame down here, and you'll see it's added a new group. So I can just do this a few times to add a few frames to the animation. So now we can start moving the letters around in the ocean so they're bobbing up and down. And something that's helpful at this point is to bring back in the onion skinning. So I'm going to turn that back up. So what this frames means is that for, say you had it set at 4, that for 4 frames after the frame you're on and 4 frames back, you will see a transparent version of those frames under here, so you can see where your animation has been. So I'm going to turn that opacity up slightly. You'll begin to see it a little bit more once we start moving things around. So our onion skinning's set, and I'm going to go into this frame and just move these elements around slightly, and there you can start to see the onion skinning. We've got the previous frames coming through there lightly. If you can see that on screen, it just allows you to see a soft reference of the previous frames afterwards. So we'll just move this frame around. I don't want to move them too much, just slightly. And you can also navigate via the frame. So if you just select the new frame, it will select the layer group in here, and then you can just move your little letters around. And just continue that a few times. Great, so previewing our animation also became a lot easier with Animation Assist. Previously, you used to have to go to the export screen and you get this tiny little window. Either you had to export it to see it, or you'd get the preview of a little thumbnail where you could see your animation. But now we can just simply press play and we can see it straight in the canvas. So that's a really cool addition. Okay, that's way too fast. They look terrified. So I'm going to go into the settings, and you'll see here frames per second. We can just turn that right down so they're not moving as fast. I've got that set at about 4. And you'll notice at the bottom we have some preferences for the animation as well. So one shot just plays through and stops. And then loop, if we have it set on loop, it will play from the beginning to the end and then go back to the beginning and to the end. Just keep doing that. And then ping pong will go from the beginning to the end, from the end to the beginning. So just back and forth like that. So it's handy to be able to change the animation style straight in the settings and preview how it looks. So ping pong actually works quite well for this, so we'll keep it on that. So there's one more feature I'd like to show you. I'll just press pause on the animation now. If you remember, we set our background layer before. We can do exactly the same thing with the foreground layer. So if I come into here and go into one of the groups, and we've got this ocean, what I can do is just make a duplication of that and move it outside of the group so it's on its own in the front. Now we've got that down as a frame, and I'm just going to choose foreground. So now this is across every layer, and you're not going to notice anything different because we have the ocean on all of the different layers as well. But what we're going to do is go into these frames and just actually move the ocean so there's a bit of movement in the water. So I'm just going to move each frame. Okay, so we can preview that and see how it looks. So now we have the ocean sort of moving as well. I mean, you could even make these ripples animate and kind of get right into it, but for the purposes of this demo, I just wanted to make sure you knew you can also choose a foreground as well, which is very helpful. I hope you enjoyed that tutorial today and you got your little letters floating around in the ocean. We'll be looking at further animation tutorials in the next few weeks, but if there's anything that you want to request, leave a comment below. Also check out the other Procreate 5 videos. So we've got one on Brush Studio and also the Color Harmony tool, as well as importing Photoshop brushes. So if you missed any of those, check them out on the channel page. So hit the thumbs up if you like this and subscribe if you want more. I'll see you next time. Bye for now.